Hello everyone, welcome back to the Alabama Woodworker. My name is Hui. In this video, I finished the construction of the base assembly for a contemporary style trestle table. I cut the bridle joint for the mid brace, drilled the drawbores, cut the tenon wedges, hand plane all the surfaces, glue and assemble the base, and attach the corbels. There are a lot of small steps involved, so let's not waste any more time and get started. In order for the tabletop to be properly supported, there needs to be a center brace that spans the width of the tabletop. The center brace is housed into the stretcher by way of a bridle joint, and that bridle joint notch is 1 1/4 inches wide by 1 inch deep. I'm going to be shaping the table feet and the braces on the miter saw, bandsaw, and then finishing with hand planes. I set my bevel gauge to 23 degrees and I go from the low corner of the table foot and mark a 23-degree cross cut for the miter saw. I then come in 1 inch and I mark an intersecting line, and with my ruler I go from the intersection of the table leg with the table foot to that intersecting line on the far right, and I draw a straight line across. That is going to define all the cut lines for the top of my table foot. Each of the feet are going to have a relief cut that spans 19 inches and 3/8 of an inch deep. So from the center line, I mark to the right and to the left of that center line 9.5 inches, and I mark a vertical line. I then take my combination square coming in 3/8 of an inch deep. I mark a line across, and that is going to define the relief cut. The layout of the end braces for the shape of the end braces is very similar. I still have my bevel gauge set to 23 degrees, and rather than a down angle, I'm on an up angle. I draw that line. I come 1 inch down from the top rather than from the sides. I draw that line, and I mark my ruler from that intersection to the intersection of where the leg meets the end brace and draw that line. And that gives me the shape for the underside of my end brace. For the mid brace, again, it's more or less the same operation. 23-degree bevel angle, draw that line, come down 1 inch, draw that intersecting line, then from that intersecting line to the intersection of the mid brace and the table leg, draw a line across, and that should give me the shape of my end brace. Now, before I go ahead and do all the shaping to the feet and to the braces, I want to go ahead and mark and drill the primary holes for the drawbore, and we'll talk about the secondary holes very shortly. But the holes for the drawbore on the feet are going to be 1 inch down from the center line. The top of the table leg will have a drawbore coming 3/4 of an inch down going into the end brace. So I'm going to go ahead and with a 3/8 inch brad point bit drill out that primary hole. For the mid brace, I'm just going to use a dowel, 3/8 inch dowel that goes 3 inches down, and that's going to give lateral stability to this mid brace. So I've got a 3/8 inch brad point bit that's marked at 3 inches deep, and I'm just going to go ahead and drill down. There's also going to be a drawbore going through the leg and the stretcher. That hole is centered coming down 3.5 inches and over 1 1/4 inch. I've clamped everything up square because I want everything to line up perfectly before I mark my secondary hole. In order for a drawbore to work, the secondary hole, the hole that goes through the tenon, needs to be offset by 1/16 of an inch from the primary hole, the hole that goes through the mortise. I'm going to take a 3/8 inch brad point bit and mark the center of the primary hole. Then I take everything apart and then mark 1/16 of an inch up the secondary hole in the tenon. The mark of the center of the primary hole is about 2 1/16 of an inch from the bottom of the tenon. I'm going to mark my combination square to 2 1/8. That's going to be a 1/16 of an inch above that primary mark and make a secondary mark. Now I'm going to drill my 3/8 inch bit through that secondary mark. As you can see, the holes are offset, and when I drive a pin through those two holes, the shoulders of the tenon are going to get sucked into the shoulders of the mortise and make a really nice tight-fitting joint. After cutting the primary and secondary holes on my feet, end braces, legs, and stretcher, I'm now going to cut my 23-degree miter on the ends of my end braces and my feet. Now that I've done all the tapers and the miter cuts for the feet and the braces, I'm going to go ahead and cut the relief, and I'm going to do that on the cross-cut sled. First, I'm going to make my shoulder cuts at 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to make a slight notch there, and then I'm going to finish out the cut on the bandsaw. The bandsaw does a really great job of shaping the legs, but to get those bandsaw marks off and those machine marks out, I'm going to use a hand plane. Coming in 1/4 of an inch from the side of the tenon, I'm going to use my crosscut saw to cut the reliefs for the wedges that will be driven into the tenons on the legs and on the stretcher. To cut the wedges that will be driven into the tenons, I made a jig using 1/2 inch plywood. I cut an 8-degree taper out of the 1/2 inch piece of plywood, and I'll run this against my bandsaw fence with a piece of hard maple that's wedged into that taper. Using my paddle, I will then direct that piece through the bandsaw blade. For the drawbore pins, I'm using 3/8 inch straight grain oak dowel from Woodcraft. I'm now going to pare away some of the material on the exit end of the mortises. This is going to create a dovetail-like effect. When the wedges are going to be driven into the tenons, that's going to push against the wall and splay against the walls of the mortises, creating a really strong mechanical joint. I'm all set and ready for my glue up. I've got my wedges cut out, my pins cut out, I've got my trusty hammer, my glue brush, a cup of water, and a sponge. And today I'm going to be using hide glue. And the reason why I'm using hide glue is because hide glue has a longer open time than PVA glue. And as I'm fiddling with the joints, making sure everything's squared away, driving in the wedges and driving in the dowel pins, I want to make sure I have plenty of time before that glue starts to set up and harden. I went over the face surfaces of the end assemblies with the low angle jack plane. I did the same thing with the stretcher and the mid brace. I finally hit all of the surfaces with 220 grit sandpaper. Now it's time to do the glue up of the stretcher and the mid brace. I flush trimmed all the dowel pins and tenons, and now it's time to flatten the entire base assembly because the tabletop needs to be able to sit flush against this surface. Now that I have the top of the base assembly all flattened, I need to add one more piece to the base, and that's the corbel that goes from the stretcher to the table leg. That corbel is going to be 10 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and 1.25 inches thick. Thankfully, I have an offcut from the stretcher that I can use, and I'm going to cut that piece to 10.5 inches. That way, when I go to the bandsaw, I have a little bit of room to cut off with the kerf of the blade. After I cut the corbel blanks to length and width, I double stick taped them together and I drew a sweep to create the outline of the corbel. I'll cut it on the bandsaw and then finish and finesse it on the belt sander. I'm really happy with the way the base assembly turned out. We still have the cherry top to construct, but I'm confident the top will have a level, solid surface to attach to. I think the big takeaway from this video is to take your time in every step, but especially with joinery, so that you're not pulling out your hair later because your joints don't fit or things don't line up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button or hit the subscribe button or hit both. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.